All right, I'm going to call our school board meeting to order for May 28th of 2019. And we have two spotlights to start with before we get to what our agenda will be. The first one is the 2019 retiree reception, which we had downstairs from 6 to 7. And then right now, I thought what we do is invite the principals to go up and shorten what you have to say, and then introduce the retiree. And then the retiree can get up and say a couple of words and tell us what book you've picked. And we'll just, does that work for everybody? Okay, let's do it that way.
Good evening. I am Shelley Nielsen, principal at Aquila, and it is an honor for me to recognize Patricia Rice, Pat Rice. She will be retiring after 40 years in education. Pat has taught at 11 different schools in those 40 years, but St. Louis Park has been blessed to have her for 29 of those years, and she taught at Peter Hobart, the junior high, and 24 of those years at Aquila. So I won't go into all the details that I did before, but I do want to end with something that Pat shared about student voice. I'm going to end with a quote that she put in her application back in 1980-something. It says, excuse me, "Music education is very important to me because we all carry one instrument with us for life, our voice. Every child deserves to learn how to use his or her voice in addition to history, theory, and the instrumental aspects of music." So it is a great honor to think that in 29 years, Pat has worked to find student voice and help them find that voice and let it shine. So thank you, Pat. And I know you're going to tell us a little bit about your book.
Thank you, Shelley. Yes, thank you to St. Louis Park for a lot of those years. My book that I chose for the Aquila Library is The Music in George's Head. It's George Gershwin Creates Rhapsody in Blue. I am a big jazz fiend, as some of you know. I have a very large children's book collection of jazz, and I have made it a habit for the past 29 years in St. Louis Park to always include some sort of jazz musician of some sort. And this book came out recently. I found it last year or the year before. It's about George Gershwin, obviously, and it talks about how he started as a child hearing music in his head. And how he found his voice at that point in time, and then through his piano lessons and the people he studied with, he became much more famous. The illustrator of this book, too, is also very famous. There's a YouTube video about it, and I can't remember what the title of it is, but it's all done in blues, dark blue, light blue, variations on blue. And so it ties in an artistic aspect to the classroom music that I teach, and also the jazz aspect. Besides the fact that George Gershwin was an amazing piano player, and you can also hear recordings of him actually on paper rolls and rolled music. So he's just an amazing person, had an amazing life, and I think he's an inspiration to all of our students, male and female, in what it can be to be a child who is inspired by music. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Pat.
It is a pleasure this evening to introduce to my right Joe Pollack, who has spent the last 26 years of his life at St. Louis Park Middle School. His first part of his life, he retired out of the military, as I just found out tonight, a lieutenant colonel in the military. And he started a second career here at St. Louis Park Middle School. He has taught for the last 26 years as our Lang and Lit teacher, but he's also done a lot of other things, like be department chair leader, steering committee member, presidential award speaker, interim dean of students, and also a football coach here, which Ken would appreciate. Joe not only worked here, he lived here, he sent his two children here. He's been an outstanding teacher in the St. Louis Park School District. He has been asked to come to high school awards ceremonies because of the impact that he has had with the students that he has taught. It is with great pleasure that I turn over the podium to Joe Pollack, Lang and Lit teacher. Thank you, Joe.
Well, I want to thank Les again for the opportunity to work with him over these years. A lot of changes have happened at the middle school, which used to be the junior high, and we continue to march forward. I just wanted to quickly share the book that I chose. It's a book written by the Dalai Lama. Rick, you got the title? How to Practice. It's a book that really talks about mindfulness. And when I came back from China 3 years ago, and we needed to do an intertextuality unit, we read the book Walkabout, which is a wonderful story about an Aboriginal boy who leads a young white girl and her younger brother, who's 8, to safety. They're stranded in the Australian outback. And there's wonderful themes in this book. As I mentioned downstairs, it's one of the most beautiful books I've read. James Vance Marshall really describes the flora and fauna at the same time. We learn about Aboriginal lifestyle and how out of place Mary and Peter are in the outback. Well, we see this practice of mindfulness in a variety of ways throughout the book. And my goal when we started this intertextuality was to find a companion piece. And I wanted to choose something that I thought that could be very meaningful and useful for them as they moved on through middle school and to high school. And so I found a article about Thich Nhat Hanh, and he's also a Buddhist Zen master. And this particular article talked about mindfulness and compassion, and how far we are removed from nature. And we see all these things come to the forefront in the book, Walkabout. And so we brought that in. I strongly believe and still believe that the idea of mindfulness, particularly for middle school children and especially adults as well, as Aston mentioned, we all can experience joy and peace from that. And as middle schoolers struggle their way through school and try to identify who they are, and with all of the distractions around them, that if they can learn to practice mindfulness. And one of the things about this book is it really is this idea of mindfulness is approached in a very secular way. And so I thought it was appropriate, and I think it's be useful for the students. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe.
Good evening. I'm Corey Mislowski, the proud principal at Park Spanish Immersion, and I have the distinct privilege to introduce Deborah Lamb, who started her career in Mound West Tonka 42 years ago, and for the past 33 years, she's graced our halls, primarily at Peter Hobart, and for the last 20 years at Park Spanish Immersion. She also worked at the junior high, Susan Lindgren, and I didn't realize, but she taught all the pre-K students in St. Louis Park once upon a time. How many years ago was that?
How many years ago was it?
A couple.
Yeah.
A couple.
Right.
And so I interviewed a few students about some words that they wanted to express to Senorita Lamb. And so a kindergarten says, "I think she's really nice." A second grader said, "I'm going to miss her high fives in the morning as she greets me." And a third grader said, I'll remember songs from many different countries." As I think back, and I've known Deborah for 19 years, we taught together once upon a time, and I will always be grateful for her kindness and for her compassion, and continually striving to look at new ways and being open to new ways of trying new things to meet your kids' needs. And also grateful for your willingness to always help out our larger community, whether it be on different task forces or being a leader within our building. So congratulations and good luck on this next chapter.
Well, the book that I selected is called Hip Hop Speaks to Children, and it's edited by Nikki Giovanni, who's done a lot with education, with talking about voice in an equity way. And I used the book myself. with my students, and it has a lot of opportunities for helping kids use their own voices and develop their own rhythms and beats and bring in any percussion instruments or even, their body percussion to express themselves. So I'm really excited and hope that it is well used. And I'd just like to say one final thing. When I first came to St. Louis Park, I was stunned at the community because I never had experienced that before. And I think that's the one thing that has impressed me and stayed with me forever, and I will appreciate always. And at the close of our last concert, we sang a song by a teacher, mentor, friend of mine called "We Do Not Stand Alone." And I really think that's a song about St. Louis Park. So I'd like to thank you. It's been a ride that I will never forget.
Thank you, Deborah.
Chair Gores, members of the board, in addition to Deborah, Patricia, and Joe, there were 5 other staff members who retired this year, and I would like to acknowledge them by reading their names, even though they weren't able to be with us this evening. Elizabeth Shannon, Gregory Nielsen, Lori Johnson, Margene Altmeyer, and Patricia Cripps. So I would like to thank them and each of you for your commitment and service to the students and families of the St. Louis Park Public School District. And I think Sarah's going to want to grab a picture of you all. So we can do that, and then you are free to go if you like.
All right, so next on our spotlight is the project citizen participants. And we're going to hear from Joe Merkel and Jill Merkel. And is it Cara Siskel?
Cara, yeah.
Yes,
Nice.
thank you. I know Mary and I were in your class earlier this year, and we're so impressed. We said, come, do this here. So take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So we're going to start just by telling you a little bit about what Project Citizen is. It's a national project, and Cara and I decided this summer that we wanted to pilot it in our school. So we talked to a few different community members as well as people from other schools on how we would go about doing that. So what it is each kid or group of students chooses one kind of problem within their community. So that can be within their school community, city, or state, and that's as far as it goes. And they they do some research on that problem. They actually take some student surveys. They wrote emails to community members, so some of you may have gotten an email or two. And they talk a little bit about what are some solutions they have. So there's actually 4 different parts of it. So the first is identifying a problem. The second is coming up with potential solutions. The third is saying what solution is the best and why. And then the fourth one is actually how do they implement their solutions. So it's really very public policy oriented. And this is done we had every single one of our 9th graders participate, which was 270 kids, something like that. And so then what they did was we had them work on it about once a week for a few different months. And for our finals period for first semester, we actually had this room all set up with all their different projects. We put our classes together and had them present over and over again to us and to other students. So they got to work on those presentation skills 5 different times and talk all about what they researched and what they looked at. From there, we chose the top projects, the top grades based on grades. And then they spent, like about a month ago, they spent a day revamping their projects, and then we invited some community members to come in and kind of hear that whole revamping part, which was a few of you, so thank you. And then from there, we took the 10 group finalists, and they got to go present at the Minnesota State Capitol, which was really cool, and got to have a little kind of self-tour of it, which was fun, as well as present to members of, all over. But it was a really cool experience. I think what we really loved is it was completely student-led. We were there to support, but it was 100% their choices of what they wanted to look at, what they wanted to tackle, and really got a taste for public policy. And I've already had a few kids that participated in this that's talking about okay, now I am going to implement this because I've come up with these solutions. So you're going to see some of those kids maybe at these meetings in a few years. So yeah.
Okay, we want to take a moment just to briefly introduce the students some of the students that were involved. It was such a proud moment as a teacher to see them present before legislatures and community members at the Capitol. So now we would like to invite up Kahari Mayfield and Tiante Bryson.
And Georgia Charpentier and Faduma Muhammad.
We've asked them just to say a brief 10 seconds about what their project was, and we'll keep these on display for the evening in case you'd like to take a look after the meeting.
As Ms. Cisco said, I'm Tiante Bryson, and this is Kahari. Our project, Citizen, was about stress and anxiety in schools. We felt like that this was a big problem, especially in high school, with being just freshmen. Mostly, we see that freshmen are mostly adaptive to get stress and anxiety in high school. And so we decided to figure out a way to help prevent it or make the rates of stress and anxiety go down. And we found a lot of strategies to help. And basically, what we choose to do was basically, what would you do? Yeah.
We chose to do a method where we take 10 to 15 minutes or at least once a week to just have quiet time or just meditate and take time to yourself to de-stress or calm down before school. And we felt that would be effective because a lot of people would be less stressful and have more time to work on their self and work on their schoolwork.
Yeah, we found meditation very helpful to deal with stress and anxiety, and so that's what we thought would help our school. So yeah.
Hi, my name is Faduma, and my project was about drug education in schools, and it was basically about how there's a widespread popularity in drugs, and students usually use it to either self-medicate or aid in their studies or because of peer pressure. And I talked about how it's an issue and how it affects teens because their bodies are still developing. And my alternative policies were finding better education, treatment plans or reforming the drug laws. And I chose better drug education because it starts with education and teaching them that the effects and harms it causes on the human body.
I'm Georgia Charpentier, and I had a partner, but she can't be here today. And pretty much our policy and the thing we chose to tackle was the bias in sports at our school. And we're not just talking about boys sports against girls sports. We're also talking about boys sports over boys sports and girls sports over girls sports. For example, the football team getting more rights to the field for practice time, even though soccer, girls soccer or something has a game, and that's kind of our biggest issue. But we're also talking about how the coaches get paid unfairly, like no matter how their season record is or anything. And so we kind of came up with like an 80-20 plan and like future funding plans for how we could work out the money for also funding the teams, as well as evening out salaries for coaches based on like how their teams do, and also like practice space for the different teams, and like finding alternate practice spaces. Like the turf is our main space, so we also found alternate practice spaces for like the football team and the soccer team when we can't all use the turf at the same time. So yeah, that was our main policies.
Thank you all very much.
You should definitely take a look at these if you get a chance.
Cara and Jill, I have a question. Are you thinking you'll do this again next year?
Yeah, absolutely. The funding for it is tied up in the omnibus, so we're hoping. Yeah, we'll find out. In a couple weeks.
Did you want to
So now we are up to the agenda. And first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda, followed by open forum. Then we have the superintendent's report. For discussion items, we have the long-term facility maintenance funding strategy. Then we have construction update, climate action planning. We have discussion of the climate leadership resolution. We have discussion of the May 23 special school board meeting that the school board had with students this week. Then we have the 2019-20 school board meeting dates to review. Policy development, first reading, policy 905, community involvement in decision making, 907, rewards, and 910, early childhood family education. Our second policy reading is policy 515, protection and privacy of pupil records, 901, community education, and 902, use of school district facilities and equipment, followed by the consent agenda. And then the action addenda. On the action agenda, we have approval of the 2018-19 probationary non-renewal staffing resolution, approval of the long-term facility maintenance funding strategy, approval of District 287 long-term facility maintenance resolution, an employment agreement approval for the Director of Assessment, Research, and Evaluation for 2019 to 20, employment agreement probationary extension, and then a policy development second reading of the policies that I mentioned earlier for the second reading, followed by communications and transmittals and adjournment. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Karen. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Ann. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries 7-0. So first up is open forum. Is there anybody here who wants to speak to us on open forum? Okay. Now we'll move to the superintendent's report.
Good evening, Chair Gores, members of the board. This evening for my superintendent's report, I would like to highlight 3 items. The first is just a reminder about the upcoming State of the Community event, which will be held this Thursday at 6:30 p.m. at The Rock. As a part of this event, you will hear short or brief updates from the St. Louis Park Public School District, the City of St. Louis Park, and the Twin West Chamber of Commerce. In addition to those updates, there'll also be representatives from many organizations there to talk about the great work and contribution that they're making to the community of St. Louis Park. My next reminder is, which is, I guess doesn't really need a reminder, is our upcoming commencement ceremony, which will be a beautiful night. I'm speaking it into existence on Thursday, June 6th at the St. Louis Park Stadium. This will be St. Louis Park's 120th commencement exercise. So please come out and celebrate the class of 2019. There'll be approximately 357 seniors graduating that evening. And our guest speaker, or should I say distinguished alumni speaker, will be Mark Rosen from the class of 70, who will have an opportunity to address all of the students, staff, and family in attendance. Lastly, I would just like to invite community members to participate on both our Wellness Policy Committee and our Financial Advisory Committee, and there's application materials on our district website. These are great opportunities to connect to our school district, learn more about our school district, but more importantly, make a positive contribution to the St. Louis Park Public Schools. There'll also be another opportunity coming up shortly that's not listed here, but we'll be seeking engagement around the work that we'll be doing connected to start time. So we'll be convening a team of community members, staff, and students and parents to come together and talk about our programming for before and after school care connected to the work that we did this school year around start time. So look forward to that soon on our district website as well. And that concludes my report for the evening.
Thank you, Aston. So first up, the discussion items is the long-term facility maintenance funding strategy.
Good evening, Superintendent Osai, Chair Gores, and board members. Tonight I'm here with Jody Zasbaugh from our financial advisor, Ehlers and Associates, and again, Tom Bravo is here, our facilities manager.
And for the viewers at home, this is Patricia
Yes, this
Magnuson,
is.
our Director of Business Services.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to just do a brief overview, given that we went into quite a bit of detail at the study session last time we were together on May 13th. I'm going to just do a brief overview of what we're trying to accomplish through LTFM, and then Jody will go actually through some of the details of the bond issues that we're requesting action on tonight. So tonight's presentation, I want to just review the funding strategy, and those are on the agenda for one of your action items tonight. Some of them are funding that we've done in the past, and we've just added some things this year. So tonight, we've provided, as usual, 3 things that are required under the statute for long-term facility maintenance, and they are a 10-year revenue projection, a 10-year expenditure plan, and a statement of assurances that the superintendent signs. It's just part of the process. Those 3 things we've done ever since LTFM funding has been in place. That's sort of normal. The change to those, of course, is that we've now incorporated our new funding strategy into those documents. Here's what we've done. We've added the idea of long-term facility maintenance bonds as one of the strategies to fund LTFM, and really it's to help us accelerate some of our most urgent needs and to optimize the timing while we're under construction right now, so the timing is really important to us. We are also able to access some additional health and safety funding for projects related to the mechanical systems and other indoor air quality concerns. So you're going to be hearing about 2 bond issues tonight. We're going to ask you to take action on 2 separate bond issues which have been crafted for us by Ehlers and Associates. We talked about this a little bit at our last meeting. The first bond issue would be for $15 million. And those projects would be scheduled next summer, the summer of 2020, and then the following summer of 2021 under Tom's direction. And here's what's happening within that $15 million. We would accelerate some of our most pressing health and safety needs. They are projects across the district that were timed later in our 10-year plan. We would accelerate them. $4.15 million in mechanical, and $3.75 million in indoor air quality projects. And in addition, we will take some health and safety projects that are included in the construction bonds and fund them out of long-term facility maintenance, so as a portion of this $15 million bond issue. What that will do is help us to replenish some contingencies in the construction bonds to help us guard against what we see as rapidly rising costs of construction for both material and for labor. The second bond issue is for $10.5 million. These are not health and safety related projects. These are deferred maintenance type projects. And these projects make sense to complete while construction is underway in some of our buildings. And you can see the 4 projects. There's some district-wide roofing, the high school theater, gymnasium, and track area, which are in sore need of deferred maintenance attention. So those are the 2 types of bond issues. The debt service on those 2 bond issues, there's about $2 million of funding available to St. Louis Park Public Schools within LTFM. The debt service on the bond issues we talked about will take about $1 million of that funding, which leaves $1 million, which was a strategic approach to the funding so that we wouldn't issue so many bonds and do so many projects that we wouldn't have funds available for the ongoing needs across the district. So this leaves $1 million in a pay-as-you-go levy to address all of our other health and safety and deferred maintenance projects. And you can see the types of things that Tom pays attention to every year in buildings across the district, and he will be very busy, as usual, doing all of those projects. So tonight's action later in the agenda, there's a combined resolution in the packet that includes the regular 10-year LTFM revenue and expenditure plan that is now accommodates the new funding strategy. And then there's an intent to sell the bonds, and Jody will talk to you a little bit about that. Our expectation is that we will come back to you on June 24th, along with someone, probably Jody, from Ehlers and Associates, to approve the bond sale. And then in September, all of this activity will be included in the preliminary levy. So if you do you have any if you don't have any questions about that, I'm going to jump over then to the pre-sale report and have Jody talk you through that. Yes, go ahead.
Can we just, I think we talked about this last time, but to confirm, there will be no change from taking this strategy, no change to the taxpayer?
What the strategy, and Jody will talk about that. It's actually one of the slides in the back part of the report. The tax impact, we were very careful to keep the tax impact flat. Now, I don't want to be confused with, there is a tax impact of adding this, but taxes that would have otherwise declined will stay flat. And so we're taking advantage of that opportunity to get some funding into these facilities that's necessary, but being very prudent about keeping the tax impact flat.
And I wasn't here at the last meeting, but that's because we're really anticipating the costs of doing this down the road are going to be higher.
Absolutely.
So if we do it now, we're actually keeping things.
That's right. For 2 reasons.
Yep.
Costs are rising, and we're in these buildings already. So we can take advantages of some construction synergies. So I believe that I can jump over to is it over here? The pre-sale report, and Jody will walk you through that document.
Just scroll here on yours, Patricia. Perfect, okay. Good evening, I'm Jody Sesba from Ehlers, and I will just highlight a couple of things on each of the pages of the pre-sale report. So on the first page here, you'll see that we are asking for approval of $20,415,000 in the resolution, but we're expecting to issue slightly under that, assuming we get a premium bid, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a moment too. The authority for the bonds, I'll touch on that a little bit. So the debt service for the health and safety portion of the bond issue is paid from additional property tax levies, and that's what Patricia just referred to. We will do this as a combined bond issue with two components. So you'll see the separate components as we go through here. And then the debt service for all of those deferred maintenance projects that she just talked about will be paid from the annual LTFM revenue that you already receive. So no additional tax impact associated with those projects. We're planning to have this bond issue at 16 years and 17 months, a little shorter than maybe we've done with like your school building bond issues, but it fits into your debt structure nicely at that level. And then finally, on the bottom of the page, you'll see we'll go through the rating process again. So Patricia will get to be involved in the rating report with the rating agency. On the second page then, we will move forward with the competitive bond sale. That's described in the middle there. And then that premium pricing structure is explained a little bit more in the bottom half of the page there. If we do not get a premium bid, we will need to issue the full amount of the bonds that you're authorizing tonight. So we definitely want to have that protection just in case the bond issue, the winning bidder has a little bit different structure than we plan on. And then finally, on page 3, you'll see that we'll be working in conjunction with your bond attorney, Tom Deans from Knutson, Flynn & Deans. He's the one who drafted your resolution of intent for your meeting tonight, Bond Trust Services as the paying agent, and then Moody's as the rating agency. This is the schedule then going forward. So tonight, the pre-sale review and the consideration of the resolution of intent later on your agenda as an action item, as Patricia mentioned. We'll go through a due diligence call when we have the official statement prepared, distribute the official statement, have the conference with the rating agency, and then we plan to receive the bids on the morning of your June board meeting, regular board meeting, and then we'll present those to you that evening and close on July 18th so that you have the money for the projects already this summer. I'll briefly touch on the attachments. The first attachment is the sources and uses then, showing the two components of the bond issue, the health and safety portion as well as the deferred maintenance portion. And then we have our all too familiar schedule, our long-term financing schedule. That's in about size 2 font. So I will go on to the chart that Patricia referred to earlier. This is the health and safety component then of the bond issue, which is where there is a tax impact associated with this. For those of you who have been on the board, you know that when we issued the bonds from your school building bond referendum, our interest rate was much lower than we anticipated, so the taxes payable in 2018 were lower. They're also lower than they stepped down a little bit again for taxes payable in 2019, the current year, because your tax base has grown so much. And we had very conservative estimates in that long-term debt plan back when we were issuing the school building bonds. We expect some growth to continue. Again, we've been very conservative in the estimates, so we're confident that we can issue the bonds and still maintain a nice level tax rate until the time when the drop down was planned as part of the school building bond issue. So that was something that was discussed at length, and we still have that nice drop down included in your debt plan going forward. This then is the component of the bond issue that comes from your existing LTFM revenue. So your deferred maintenance projects will be financed from this, and you can see the total revenue shown in about the middle of the page there. All of your revenue does come from local tax levy. And then finally, that far column, general fund revenue, that's the amount that will be remaining for pay-as-you-go projects. And as Patricia mentioned, that's just a little bit over $1 million a year. So you're using less than half of your long-term facilities maintenance revenue. This is a strategy many school districts are using because of the flexibility allowed in this program and the fact that if you're doing some other projects, trying to tackle some of the larger projects, financing them up front, and then spreading the costs over a period of time and making those payments from your long-term facilities maintenance revenue makes a lot of sense for school districts. So that is the end of the schedules, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Could you repeat the part about you said the bonds will be in 2 parts, or what was it?
Yeah, so we'll actually sell this as one bond issue, but it will have 2 purposes. So the health and safety component as well as the deferred maintenance component, and we need to have separate schedules for those 2 components so that the state knows how to include the debt service levies on your levy report that gets issued each fall. So they track those separately, and they need separate schedules from us, but we can sell it as a combined bond issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think
You're
we don't have
welcome.
any questions. That's a good sign.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Well, Tom, you will get to talk on this presentation.
That's okay. I talk enough.
So what we're going to hear, this is Tom Bravo, our facilities manager, and we've asked him to present on kind of a construction update that focuses on how our construction work is really trying to be climate conscious. And we heard a few meetings back from students from our Roots and Shoots group asking us to adopt a resolution that deals with climate change. That's on our agenda to talk about later. But one of the kind of the, to oversimplify this, one of the points of the resolution is to ask for some goals to be adopted. And Tom has those there, and I'm just going to ask if you can, while you're presenting on what you're doing, if there's a way to link what you're doing to the way those goals are reflected in the proposed resolution. That would just be helpful to me and I think to us. And those proposed goals are net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2040, 100% renewable electricity from renewable sources such as wind and solar, reducing solid waste 50% by 2030, reducing vehicle emissions 25% by 2030, and reducing energy usage 30% in school district facilities by 2030. And with your presentation, we just want to put some real data to those lofty goals. And if you can help us a little bit with that, we're grateful.
Well, I appreciate Board Chair Gores, Superintendent Osai, and school board members. I'm here to kind of share with you that with those goals, there had to be some type of a foundation. And 3 years ago when I started, 4 years ago, I'm sorry, 4 years ago I started, we looked at how we're going to get to this point, even before we had our dialogue with Roots and Shoots and the community about how do we get to this point. So I want people just to know that we follow the mission statement of the district. And I know that you guys know the mission statement, but I just want to make it clear to everybody that our mission statement, according to what the district is this to create and maintain a tool that helps build excellence in learning and environment. And what I'm going to share with you, along with what you want to see those pieces in there, is what we're talking about, is what are we doing for the students of St. Louis Park in the future and the community. So we started, like I said, looking at how do we start conserving energy or saving energy and using alternative energy, not only because of energy itself, but what are all the factors for our carbon footprint that is down to almost net zero. And what we have done is, I want to share this with you, is that we took our strategy 4 along with the mission statement, and that is to ensure our facilities are consistent with the needs of our learners and the community. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing because you guys have seen this, I think, 3 or 4 times now. But we do want to share with you that we are aiming for these goals. And in order to do so, we have talked to a lot of consultants. We've talked to architects, engineers. We've talked to our energy folks. We have a great collaboration and working relationship with the big regulatory agencies like Xcel Energy, like Centerpoint Energy, where we talk to them about how are you going to get to your point so that we can get to ours. And the things that we want to share with you, just a few bench points, is that as we do our remodeling projects, as we continue doing everything that we're doing, or even the long-term facility maintenance that you just heard with the things that are going in there, like if you really don't see that indoor air quality, looking at putting more money towards indoor air quality, putting more money towards mechanical systems, that is something that when we do those things, we are going to reduce our energy usage, but also then we'll look at how do we then bring in alternative energy into this. So at the high school, we are going to be saving approximately 306,000 kilowatts by just doing what we're doing, now with the referendum money and all the projects that we're doing. Our gas consumption is going to go down, and our energy use is going to go down by 19%. So that's just current, the next 4 to 5 years that we're going to be very productive in what that is. Not only that, but this district because of what, the carbon footprint doesn't just talk about energy reduction, doesn't talk about solar or wind power, so forth. It talks about sustainability. It talks about how do we reduce our carbon footprint. So we're looking at all the sustainabilities. We're reducing our water usage here by using different type of water mechanisms, drinking fountains that kids like to fill up their bottles every day to go into their classrooms and this is a conservative, 1 to 3 million gallons by the time we're done in 5 years. And that's big to reduce that part of that carbon footprint of saying we're not wasting water, we're not just waste, because carbon footprint is reducing the waste. We have sustainability of furniture, carpet, anything that you see there. That's the reduction of the carbon footprint, because we're not taking it to landfills anymore. We're not paying this large cost to burn it, to get rid of it. We're recycling it. We're repurposing it. We're taking it from cradle to grave. And that's a big thing that St. Louis Park should be very proud of. And I'm proud to be part of that, because we say we care about this earth and we care about the community itself. So I wanted to kind of share with you what the high school is doing. We have slides on what the middle school we're going to be doing. Again, some major reductions. 24% baseline reduction. Park Spanish immersion, that's probably going to be the one that's going to come out of the chute first when you go over there, and we're going to be giving you a tour sometime this summer. You're going to be impressed. And it didn't take much to get to the level that we, the community, the students, and even the board and the superintendent expect of what type of a product we're going to have for you guys to look at. So we're excited about that. And how we're going to be measuring a lot of this stuff, and mainly the energy, is to the B3 benchmark. And what we've been told by the legislature, and Patricia kind of reminded me last week, is they're expecting all districts to be part of this B3 benchmark. And we're happy that we've been part of it since 2015. Doesn't mean that we've accomplished a lot in 2015. Just means that we started with almost a 0 star, and now a lot of them have 2 to 3 stars, and we're moving up, and we're going to continue moving up by doing the things that we're doing now for St. Louis Park. So Aquila has, like I said, 2 stars, but in the beginning, it really didn't have much in there. So we did a lot of improvements by reducing and replacing our fluorescent lights. That's the big first step. And then we're upgrading a lot of equipment. Peter Hobart, we did some work at Peter Hobart prior to even this referendum. This district, before I even came, did some additions to Peter Hobart and Susan Lindgren, or just Peter Hobart, I'm sorry. And that, with those things that you guys did before I came, did help me get the carbon footprint down lower. Susan Lindgren did a lot of work in the last couple of years at Susan Lindgren, if you've been there. So these are things that help reduce energy, but we also want to let people know that with the goals of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2040, 100% renewable electricity, wind and solar by I think it's 2040, reduce solid waste, and so forth. We're on our way. Can I say that this can really happen? That's our goal. That is the goal. Let's not say that. I don't know what the world's going to come in 20 years from now. I've been doing this for the last 40 years, and I've seen a lot of changes. The energy crisis in the 80s, the 70s with the gas rations. Things do come up in the world that, people have hiccups. But I can guarantee you that the things that we put in place now, that's our goal, and that's the strive that we're going to be doing, is pushing for this in the future. So as you see going forward, Lennox, we put a lot of work into Lennox. We continue doing work in Lennox. We're measuring it with our B3 benchmark. Central, we haven't touched that too much of it yet, but we will be as we do more construction. And again, getting back to the sustainability materials. As I said earlier in several board meetings, we now have all our paints at 0 VOC. That's a big feat. There's still painting companies out there that want to use VOC, because VOC is a more durable product, but we've decided not to go with that route. Not because we want to keep on painting year after year, because we won't. We have other means and methods of taking care of that. And then, all materials will have a longer cycle. And equipment is going to be repurposed and reused. And we're looking at options of salvaging and distribution of used furniture. Xcel Energy. we talk to them a lot. And I think the city has also, and they're committed, and what, along with them and us with our agreement with them, they're committed to have reduced of their Midwest plants of 80% by 2030 in Upper Midwest. As you can read there, this came straight from XL Energy. So we know that we need partnering to make sure that we get to where we're at. And this is one partner that we are working with, just to make sure they stay on their path, and then we stay on our path. I know people are excited, and I think people will be excited. Our first building that we are going to be putting solar panels on in the future, if everything goes well, and we are developing a request for proposal, is Cedar Manor, just because of the fact that Cedar Manor will be prepared for that. So that's just one proposed area. It's not, nothing has been finalized yet. We still got to review it with you, the school board, and the superintendent, but that is one area that we want to propose for the beginning of solar panels, and then going forward for that. And then, of course, waste reduction, recycling organics. This is one thing that we need to continue working with the schools. We're not there yet, we know that, but we have a plan that how to get it not only in the cafeterias, but get it in the classrooms also. So that is our goal. And this is part of the reduction of the carbon footprint, the waste, trying to get rid of as much waste as possible. So, so that's the main thing that I wanted to share with you. So to answer the questions that you posed, that is our intent. That is our goal, is to get there along with what we're doing. Any questions?
Tom, I just would be, what are the factors that you consider when you're deciding whether something is appropriate for solar panels or not, and then how long do they last, and what's the plan for, what's the thought right now about what do we do when they've used up their life expectancy, and how is that climate conscious?
So one of the factors that we're using as we develop our request for proposal, and we're partnering with a company that has actually started to do 4 or 5 districts now, and because of the things that we brought up initially is, what do we do with the solar panels in 20, 25 years when they're no longer useful? So I can't tell you that 100% this is what we're going to be going down the path, because I really prefer that I would like to review it with the superintendent and the district of our options that we're looking at. But one of the things that we're going down the path of is, how do we recycle it by partnering with a company that actually would take it and recycle it versus us throwing it in a landfill in the future. Other things that we're doing is that we're taking advantage, of course, of the federal funding that's out there and having an independent contractor manage it, and we reap from the less energy and also from the profits of the electricity. So we're kind of looking at a few options, but I guarantee you that what we come out with to propose to you in the next few weeks, it's going to be something that's fiscally responsible and something that I think this district will say, yes, we like it, because it's going to give us what we want, and as to go with solar panels that kids can learn from and reduce our energy, plus we don't have to worry about how do we take care of it in the future when I'm going to be long retired. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
It does half of the question. We're not putting solar panels on every roof that we're redoing, though, are we?
Correct.
And that's why I'm asking why and why not? What are the variables that you're thinking about when you're looking at that decision?
One of the things that we're looking at, of course, is load, dead load and live load of roofs, the types of roofs, and the amount of material that's on the roofs. Most of the roofs have exhaust units or air handling units on top of them. So by putting solar panels near those things, they're not going to gain the sunlight that normally an open roof would. So we're looking at, right now, we're looking at over gym roofs, which are wide open. If you saw at Cedar Manor, the areas that we're picking are the ones that are wide open, the gym, the media center, things like that don't have a lot of pieces of equipment on the roofs, where the other ones, we would have to stagger them, or else, again, according to the vendor that we're working with for the RFP, says it's not beneficial, because it just won't gain the energy that we should. So that's how we're looking at it, and then we're picking from those roofs how to keep them, how to repair them faster so that we don't have to go back and take the solar panels down until 20 years or so.
Thank you, Tom. I knew it was more complicated than I knew, and I just wanted a little glimpse into your world.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much for really your, and Karen was just saying you're doing a great job, and thank you for all your work.
Thanks,
and,
Karen. Thank you. Thank
I'd
you.
agree. I'd agree with that. It's really good to have you with us, Tom. So next up, and don't go too far, just in case you're back for this, but it's to talk about the climate leadership resolution, and we have a copy of the proposed resolution with some revisions in our packet. We had a meeting by Roots and Shoots with us, and then we had a meeting amongst the school board before one of our meetings, and we heard some sort of high-level concerns that people had, and then we took a stab at drafting the resolution and revising it to sort of meet those higher-level concerns. And so this is the language we have here. I think the only change I think I would suggest to this is in that the second paragraph that says, whereas the St. Louis Park Climate Action Plan was adopted in February of 2018, I would put a period there and not have the rest of that paragraph. I'm not sure that we're stating everything that they adopted in their resolution, and I don't really know that we need it for what we're doing. So I just would throw that out for consideration and then invite other comments. Mary, you might want to say more since you did some really good work on doing some of the drafting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, right?
No. One change in here that I apologize did not make it into the draft that appeared in our board book. But where it says strategy 4 of the district's strategic plan states that we will ensure that our facilities are consistent with the needs of our learners and our community, and the district's facilities manager is making commitments to run on clean energy to improve public health and to help tackle climate change. That's how that whereas clause should read. I can repeat that if people didn't follow it. If you could tell from my voice, I haven't exactly been running at 100% the last week, so I apologize for missing that error in the board book.
Can you read it one more time?
Sure. So whereas strategy 4 of the district's strategic plan states that we will ensure that our facilities are consistent with the needs of our learners and our community, and the district's facility manager is making commitments to run on clean energy to improve public health and to help tackle climate change. And then the other question that we had for the group is, excuse me, in this, the first two sentences should be deleted. So just ignore those first two sentences. This will all be much clearer in the next version that you guys for the second reading. But we were concerned that on the first major whereas clause, whether we should get into the specifics about what St. Louis Park's climate action plan was, because I think there were a lot of aspects to it, and so what it states, how it states right now is how it was drafted by Roots and Shoots, but I know that there were more parts to it, so we were talking about whether or not we just leave it as, whereas the St. Louis Park Climate Action Plan was adopted in February of 2018, and then move on to the next whereas clause, whether we leave it as written and just highlight a couple of the decisions that were included in that plan, or whether we go further and include more of the details. Does anybody have any thoughts on what might be the best way to do that?
Yeah, my preference is just to put a semicolon at the end of the fact that the city adopted one and not need to repeat their plan, because we're just talking here about our plan. That's where we're going here.
and part of it is the school district and the city, we share geographic boundaries. We do work together in partnership and collaboration, but we have more buildings, and a lot of our buildings are a lot older. So we need to incorporate this work into our existing strategic plan, but we also have to set the stage for our next strategic plan, which is coming forward. So having language in this type of resolution that allows us for that flexibility is really important.
So I have a question and a thought. And the question is sort of, I think Nancy kind of previewed this question when Tom was going up earlier, that we have a lot of sort of relative guidelines in here, so percentages. But we don't have, we don't really say in the resolution where we're starting. So my question is, what's the start point so that we know we'll have success, so that we can set ourselves up for success when we're saying this percentage by this date, percentage of what? Of right today, of 3 years ago, of when the buildings are done. So yeah, if you want to answer that question, then I can. Some other things.
And Tom, one of our biases leans towards giving you and us credit for the good work you've done up till now. So know that as you start to answer.
I guess, again, you're right. We need a foundation. And I think the foundation is what you see in the PowerPoint that I just gave, because that's, although that, we were part of B3 benchmark for the last few years, I don't have the exact data on that, but we do have the data now that shows where we're at, and that has to be the foundation of going forward, where we're going to be. So from 2019 on, that's what I would say, even though, again, we've started striving for this since 2015, And if you say 2015, we should look at that, I can provide that, try to get that information for you.
So then I also have a thought, a suggestion, I don't really know. I've just been reflecting on this a lot and really thinking about how this resolution itself really speaks to kind of like the physical operation of our district, which is certainly an important component as we're kind of thinking about climate leadership, but really our primary business here is education. So why don't we have a resolution or a statement here giving support to educating our students about climate change, committing to collaboration and partnership with our students who are developing climate leaders, from not just Roosh and Shoots, although certainly want to give them the credit they're due, but to say that we're supporting developing climate leaders throughout our system.
I can say that I completely agree. We want to do that, and I think that actually came up in our meeting with Roots and Shoots. I think we hadn't had those discussions yet with our Director of Curriculum and Instruction about how those things would be incorporated. We didn't want to delay this aspect of this resolution for the school year. That's my short answer is, yep, I agree, and maybe this is a resolution part 2 question after we can talk a little bit more with Dr. Duffy.
Yeah, I had a similar sort of thought. We have not drilled down from our level of work into curriculum management and curriculum instruction before, and that felt like we were getting close, if not over that line, even though I agree with everything you're saying. And I know that science is coming up for review in the curriculum, so I think we can keep that in mind and have more conversations, but I'm not sure that it's appropriate for a particular resolution. I'm just not sure. But I agree that I want to know, I want to ask those questions when we start talking about science and what we're teaching and what we're not teaching and why. I think those are questions and how we're using Westwood. I think we're there. I just don't know that if you start having a resolution about one aspect, how many do you have about? So that's my reservation.
I guess I see this as aspirational in many ways, and so I maybe would push back and say, could we make an aspirational point here that doesn't that certainly doesn't pin Dr. Duffy or anyone else to any particular action, but that kind of says philosophically that this is something that we are supportive of.
So in my workplace, what Ann did was just give herself an action item. So I think I would say if you want to craft something for us to take a look at and run it by Patrick, we'll take a look. But I mean, I guess I'm kind of in the same position of it'd be nice to have something and to craft it, but if it in the end it doesn't fit, we'll leave it out.
Enough nods for considering a statement.
And I think it's important to remember the foundation of this place where we are now. It came out of the fact that Al Wahetka said to the school community, I can teach AP Environmental Science to 9th graders. I can do it. And he had a group of 9th graders who were willing to figure out how to do that, because it was very unusual at the time for a high school to have a 9th grade class at the AP level. And that work was really successful. And out of that came the Roots and Shoots group, and the effort has grown and grown and grown. And what is impressive to me is it started with an academic foundation, but students were supported to show leadership, and not only within our school community, but they brought it to our broader community. And that's something that I think is really important to not forget. It was our mission of educating, our business of education, which started all of this. And you know, we should really be proud of that effort. And I'm trying to think, my kid, who's 23, was in that first cohort of kids who took that class and did well. And it continues to grow and expand. And we've done a lot of work, we have more to do, but it started with education.
Well, my preference is not to add that to this resolution. This is about the facilities, but it doesn't mean we can't bring it. That's just me as one person. If Joe, if you want to see some language, come back for the second reading for us to take a look at, putting it in here. I mean, we can do that. I mean, if Ann's willing. And if Patrick and Aston would support that, I have some real reservations.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to take a look at it. I'm not promising one way or the other. I have great faith in Ann's writing ability, but I mean, I do share some of these concerns about making this too broad and creating something that continues to creep out. But maybe there's a way to narrowly tailor this that makes a lot of sense, because as Karen was saying, I mean, this was kind of driven from this to begin with. So.
I hear you, Nancy. So on our agenda, unless there are any other comments today, this will come back for a second reading at our next meeting, and we will get the revisions done that Mary has here, and then see if Ann has something else for us to consider at that point. And our next meeting, I believe, is June 10th. And I would propose having it on the action agenda as well at that meeting, unless somebody feels that that's too soon. I mean, we can always take it off, but I think we'll put it on, and then we can make our decision based on our conversation whether we're ready or not. Next up, so we recap of our meeting with high school students on May 23rd. Every year, the school board sets up a meeting with high school students, and we've done it in various ways over the years. In the last couple of years, we've met during the school lunch hour, which means we've gotten more students and more diverse students, and we've been really happy with that. It also has the effect of meaning sometimes not every board member can attend because of work and other conflicts. So I think we had 4 of us at this meeting, and so I just would give a chance for people who were there to sort of summarize some of the themes and things that we heard from our students.
Okay, so this is the first time I was able to do the lunchtime meeting, and there was a lot of kids there compared to doing it in the evenings where we had maybe 10, 12. I think we had probably 30, 40 kids. And all of them were very energetic, and at least at my table, and were willing to talk. I had probably 7 pages of notes. But I just picked out 2 or 3 things here that I wanted to talk about. And one was tracks. So we have multiple pathways for kids to succeed and go on to their next stage of life, both scholastically or however those paths that they choose. Some of the kids that were at my table felt that there should be other paths other than what we've designed for them. One of which they were athletes. So they want to go to college, and they want to go to college, play sport, and be successful in scholastically. And they didn't feel that we have that pathway for them to go to a D1 school and, say, play basketball, and also be well at their education. So I think in that they needed to be able to have assistance on how to navigate through the athletic corridors of making it from high school to college. And I can agree with them. We lack in some of that area, and that's something I think we can talk to the athletic director and see what, I've talked to him actually in the past, of which maybe there's something that they can do with that on, giving more kids more education on how to navigate the systems when you're going into college, or at least when you're in sophomore or junior or senior and you have aspirations to become an athlete in a D1 or D2 school. The other one was advanced classes. So many of the girls at my table were in advanced classes, and there was a couple of the black girls that were in advanced classes too, and they felt really, as we've talked about, they felt really alone and not able to flourish as a student and a black student in that class, in that setting. So that's something that we've talked about, and they were really happy that, all of them were really happy that we've changed the curriculum for freshmen, so you don't have to take all 4 advanced classes. You can just take 1 or 2 or whichever they are, with the goal of getting more people of color into advanced classes so that it'd feel better. So that was one of the big concerns. We talked probably 25, 30 minutes about that whole thing there itself. And then some of the suggestions were mentoring. So maybe have some kids that have been through the advanced classes to mentor some other kids that are thinking about advanced classes so that they can feel more comfortable going into them and knowing that they're not scary and terrible classes to get into and a whole lot of work, but they are a lot of work. So that was their suggestion that they made. And then also, they also talked about the amount of classes, 7 classes instead of maybe breaking them up and maybe seeing 4 or 5 classes per day as opposed to, so block schedules more. We didn't really talk much about that. It was just something they threw out there. It was all around the scholastic pieces. And, and find a way to have a interim to the advanced classes. So you have your general classes, and then you have advanced. They would like to see if there was something between that where kids can move into there and then move into their advanced classes. I know some of the teachers do break up their classrooms some way like that, especially in math, but they would like to see that more broadly. And then communication. They're just wondering, some people had a lot of great communication and know how to get, let's say, a Chromebook from the library, or be able to do your work in certain areas and things like that. So they just felt that we needed to do some more communication on some of the resources that we have available to everybody, and we just kind of spitball around on that. So that's what we're talking about. There's a whole lot of other things.
This was the first time I had done this in the format where we each had different tables, and that really worked great. I had to talk to group 2. Could have gone for another hour, I think. I had pages of notes too. I'll just try and mention a few things. They talked about the APIB classes too. They said they thought the materials were getting a lot more diverse than they used to be, but maybe the classes themselves are not as diverse as they should be in terms of the people. They look at other schools and they wonder why we don't just show everyone a computer like I guess most of the schools that they're aware of. They mentioned some of the facilities. They mentioned the track area and the auditorium need some work, and they might be glad to see that was mentioned in our work that we're going to be doing. They thought all sorts of ideas. They didn't think maybe the gym time and the turf was fairly allocated in early spring for all the sports. They wanted to know if we could reduce the admission to like basketball games and other games to increase participation, attendance, I mean, and help school spirits. They thought the air conditioning in the high school was kind of inconsistent, where it has it. They thought maybe we could do some different kind of block programming. There's varied opinion whether advisory was really worth it or not. They thought maybe at least in conjunction with advisory they could do maybe some sort of life skills class, maybe like for teach budgeting, that kind of stuff. There was discussion about how they think only the wealthy can do well in ACTs. It's not just the extra tutoring, it's just being able to afford to take the test multiple times and get used to taking it. We talked about that. They wish there were more mental health efforts around the high school. And they also just like to have increased waste off of feedback in general. You know, they even wondered if we could have perhaps a non-voting student rep on the school board.
Thanks, Jim. Ann?
First I'd like to say thank you to the students. I had August, Prashana, Maddie, Zoe, Isabel, and Ezra at my table. And I want to thank them for taking the time out of their day, a very busy time of year for all of us, to come and meet with us. And I think we might think, oh, they're just coming for the pizza and to sort of complain about their inconsequential items. But I tell you, these students are passionate and capable, and we had an extremely high-level conversation about a lot of things that are going on in their lives. And I just kind of, I sort of pulled out, at the end, we kind of tried to gather some themes that I could take to you all. A lot of the specifics are similar to what Ken and Jim already shared. They asked us to hold them and ourselves to high expectations. They asked for accountability to our stated mission and our core values, especially in our racial justice work. They asked for a curriculum and classroom design that is personally and culturally relevant, and they asked for more support from counselors and more access to rigorous courses for all students. I also want to point out that I had 2 graduating seniors at my table. I want to really uplift those 2 for their willingness to come and share for the benefit of students who aren't even here yet. I can't wait to see what comes next for those 2 young leaders. That said, I wish that it wasn't only in the last few weeks of their time with us that we were hearing from them, and I challenge us as a board to develop more ways to elevate and involve student voice in our policy making throughout the year and not just in May. I think it's late. It's late. I said to those kids, it was like an exit interview. You can tell me whatever you want. You're going to be crossing the stage in a couple of weeks. So I'm looking forward to seeing them on the stage and looking forward to seeing the rest of these students again very soon.
And then I had a table of about 6 students, and we covered a variety of topics. 3 of my students were seniors, and they were in the non-traditional academy, which I had not known about, and so I need to learn more about that because they were really excited about it. And at least two of the students at my table had applied for and I think been accepted into the non-traditional academy for their senior year, and they were also quite excited about that. Every one of them had some plan for their future, the juniors and seniors, which was nice to hear. When I asked, where did you get the idea for your plan, several of them, it's sort of like a family tradition of a sort. So it's interesting to hear the family impact in combination with our school impact on our students. We talked a little bit about teachers, and I tried to push a little bit about what makes a good teacher then. What is it that, that you say this is a good teacher? What is it that fits for you in that? And they talked about a teacher who cares about them personally, who in their hall actually knows their name and says hi, who sees them as a real person, who doesn't stereotype them, doesn't assume that because they're black they're going to have poor grades, or because they're black they're going to be loud. They mentioned those 2 stereotypes in particular, which they found offensive. And they like teachers who teach, just don't want you to fill out a paper, and they liked a teacher who had a sense that they had a life beyond school. And I thought those were just qualities beyond the subject matter that we would be worth sharing with our teachers when they're wondering, what do I do to let a student know that I care? Well, here are some things students identify as showing that you care. I thought that was helpful. They talked about lunch concerns. It was more, and I think we're going to fix this when we do the remodel and we make the lunchroom bigger, but they basically said there are too many kids for 3 lunches and you wait a long time in line and you hardly have any time left to eat, and if you've got the 3rd lunch, you may not get food, or it might be cold, or you might not have as many choices for food. And I thought that was instructive to hear, and I hope that we can fix that going forward. They were very happy that there is now a Revisit Ethnicity and Culture elective that you can take apparently when you're a senior. I think it was only 1 semester, and it's 1 section, and they kind of wanted more of that. That was the sense. We're happy to have this. We think we need more. And they were not particularly, and you don't want to overstate from a couple of students. So, this is not a broad survey, but these are their voices and their experience. And they were not particularly happy with how Black history is taught here, and we can talk more about that. But their memory is it's only taught in February. Their memory is it's only about slavery, and their sense is we already have heard again and again and again about Martin Luther King Jr., but I'd like to hear more about other accomplishments of other people of color, and they didn't have a sense of getting enough, and they wanted more of that. And I just wanted to, as we're working on our racial justice piece, to simply add that voice. I then asked them what books they had liked that they had read, and I thought was fascinating. The answers from my table were The Hate You Give, Night, They Cage the Animals at Night, Their Eyes Were Watching God, Othello, which was taught in Shakespeare, and Hidden Figures, which I thought was just very, all good books, and the ones that really, I think, resonated with their lives. And I had one male student at my table, Ken, and he wanted more VOTEC. You'd have liked that boy. He wanted more hands-on, and they all wanted a bit more relevant learning. Talk to me about credit. Talk to me about how I do a budget. Talk to me about the real life as I'm about to head out into it. And they wanted us to incorporate that. I always thought we could do that in our math classes, but maybe it's just me drilling down too far. They asked if we liked being on the school board and why we did this work. And they asked if we meet with students from other schools. And I just would suggest, echoing a bit of Ann's comment, that we may want to think about doing that, and think about doing these meetings earlier, in the year, and before, not during Ramadan, and not when there's a big AP or IB or other test that students can't come talk to us because they've got a big test. I think we just need to be, probably to the next chair, I would say, being more mindful about when we get this scheduled at the beginning of the year so it fits more. My apologies for not having done that.
If I could ask, to follow up on what those students said, Superintendent Osai, I know that you have opportunities where you are connecting with students and you are hearing from them. Do we know if our principals are having events like this or talks like this with students on a regular basis?
Vice Chair,
I'm putting you on the
it's
spot with
okay.
that
I
one.
was just thinking about, I was trying to search for specific scheduled events like this. I know that our principals get feedback continually from students on a daily basis, but I was just thinking about a more formal type of setting. And I know I'm just thinking there are some that host different meetings with grade levels, particularly some of our elementary leaders host different events with their students. But to your point, I think we could more systemically create systems where all leaders and staffs are getting more continuous feedback. We do a student engagement survey every year, but that's kind of a one-shot deal. And to your point, it would be important to have a continuous feedback loop, and we don't currently have that developed. I really appreciate everything that's been shared, and it's some of it really excites me because there's alignment to some of the work that we're currently doing here in St. Louis Park, connected to some of the work that we're doing around curriculum. I heard several of you talk about students suggesting here at the high school that we should revisit or take a deeper look at our schedule, and is that current schedule meeting the needs of our students? And that's something that we'll be doing next school year. I think I heard somebody share something about admission into different sporting events for students to increase participation, and that was something that a group of parents came to us with this winter, and we spent some time studying it, looking at the financial impact from gate receipts, what that would mean, and have made the decision to next school year here at the high school, all students, St. Louis Park students with a student ID can get into sporting events for free. So, and that's something that's not only done here, but that's being done in other school districts around us. I believe Hopkins may be doing that as well, and there are a couple of other Robbinsdale schools are doing it. So this is something that's happening across the West Metro. I also, as I think about some of the things that have been shared, I know we as a group have talked a little bit about having student representation on the school board, and that may certainly be something that we can consider at a later time. So Chair Gores sent me a long, and I haven't had a chance to unpack it, but sent me a list of feedback from the meeting, and what we'll do as a leadership team is start to unpack that feedback and figure out specifically what's aligned to the different strategies of our strategic plan and how do we connect it to work that we're doing. And if it's not specifically aligned, how does that influence future work? So thank you all for hosting the meeting. I know it means a lot to our students, and the feedback that you've gathered and now have shared with us will help us as we improve to make a more inclusive learning environment for every student here in St. Louis Park.
So Aston, I also think as a superintendent, don't you have a meeting with a group of students? I just want to talk about how you hear their voice in that context. I forget the name of the group.
What is called a Superintendent Student Leadership Advisory Group, and we meet several times throughout the school year, and we discuss all sorts of different topics, from school board policy to the impact of that policy on them. They've been really instrumental in looking and helping support some of our curriculum design processes and giving us feedback around their experience in those different subject areas. They have also really worked hard to just share what their daily lived experience is in our schools, and how far away we are in some areas to get to our desired outcomes. So I've valued it. That group is comprised of students in 5th grade through 12th grade, and students, once they join in 5th grade, they stay on for the remainder of their experience here in St. Louis Park. And what I've observed just in my short time here is that many of the students on that group also serve in, as they start this, superintendent student leadership advisory group in elementary, when they get to high school, they, go into other leadership capacity, so student council and other areas of leadership. So I'm excited about the work that they're doing to positively impact our school district.
Thank you. Actually, next on the agenda is the 2019-2020 school board meeting dates. And so we have those in our packet. They were approved at the January 14, 2019 school board meeting, but apparently they're coming back with some notations on them, but I don't see, I don't notice that any of this is a change. Is any of this a change from what we approved before?
Chair Gores, there are no changes, just bringing them back as just one more look through to make sure that we still support these dates, and if so, we will work to get these posted and out to the community. So no changes, just wanted to bring them back up. I think the last time that we came together around these dates, the only change or recommendation that was made once they were approved was that November 12th date. We originally had the meeting on Veterans Day, and the school board caught that and decided to change the date. So besides that, there have been no changes. This is just one more time before we post them and get them in the city school calendar that will be going out shortly, and all of those types of things.
And we've checked these against any other high religious holidays, right? Yep, Sarah's over there nodding. Thank you. No other comments? We'll move on to policy development, first reading. Let's start with policy 905, community involvement in decision making.
Chair Gores, members of the board, policy 905 was last revised in 2007. This policy, is a local policy here. It's not an MSBA policy, but I certainly appreciate the language that has been revised over the years, and it really reflects the work that we try to do here. Earlier today in my superintendent's report, I highlighted a couple of different community groups that we're trying to get input and participation in, and I think this policy just speaks to that. So.
My one question is it talks about students, parents, and the community, and I'm wondering if we want to include students, parents, guardians in the community, since we've tried to add that in most of our policies. Okay.
I love the intent of the policy. I would just like to make it a little bit more robust, if possible, without, getting it too complicated. For example, to say things like reasonable effort should be made to identify and understand the desires or concerns, or we can stick with desires, but I would like to add identify and understand, because I think that is different.
I liked your change from exerted to made.
Yeah.
It's a little more basic language. Simple. So what you said is St. Louis Park School Board believes that all reasonable efforts should be made to identify and understand the desires of students, parents, and guardians and the community, and to be responsive through its actions to those desires. Right, next up is policy 907 for a first read. That is rewards.
Chair Gores, members of the board, policy 907 was adopted in 2006, and as it states, just at a high level, this policy just gives the board authorization to offer rewards in the case of some sort of criminal activity in which the board is seeking information that could potentially lead to some sort of conviction against crimes against students or school employees, volunteers, etc. So this, again, is not a MSBA policy, but this just gives the board an opportunity to offer rewards in the case that you wanted to, if there was something that happened against a student, staff member, volunteer, or school board member.
Does anyone know if we have ever, since January 23rd of 2006, issued a reward or offered a reward for anything?
I can say in the last 16 years, we have not, to my knowledge, and I think it requires board approval.
Just curious.
Apparently, there's a statute that provides for us to have this opportunity, and this is what we have to do if we're going to do it, and that must be why this came to be.
Better to have it now than to try and get one in place when we want it.
All right, no other comments. Moving on to policy 910, early childhood family education.
Yes, Chair Gores, members on the board. Policy 910 was adopted in 91, and at this we don't have any revision dates, but I think that's because it was so well written that it stood the test of time. Right, you never had to touch it, and as we reviewed it, it certainly still meets the scope of the work that we do, and we appreciate the fact that it allows us flexibility and it's not too specific in nature.
I'm wondering if we should change the age ranges though, because I'm sure we have some 6-year-olds in there, so maybe we say either 0 to 6 or just all children pre-kindergarten.
The way we say it now is birth through a year before kindergarten.
So let's change that for all children from birth to pre-kindergarten or year before kindergarten. And then also to Nancy's point about guardians, to give parents and guardians meaningful choices.
All right, so now we are moving on to the second reading of policy 515, protection and privacy of pupil records.
As you all recall, I discussed this, or most of you recall, who were here last meeting, that I discussed the basis for this change last meeting. I did send this language to MSBA to just get their okay on, and the person who would advise this has been out of the office and was not able to comment yet. So if anybody has any concerns along those lines, as I said, I did check with MSBA before about just the question of whether we could. They haven't approved the specific language. But if everybody wants to just get MSBA's sign off on this, maybe we can hold this to a third reading if you feel that's necessary. I just wanted to throw that out there. The language in red that you got on the, Julia was kind enough to pass out a couple of pages that was on our seat when we sat down. It's just the red that's on top of the second page there.
We've discussed it, and I think if the board is comfortable, we certainly can go forward with it, if there aren't any reservations.
I think so too, and if you do hear something back, we can always bring it back,
Revise it,
and
sure.
revise it. That will then be on our action agenda as with the change that we have here in red. Next up is Community Education 901.
Yeah. Chair Gores, members of the board, Community Education 901. If you recall, the last time we discussed it, there was some feedback from Director Tatalovich just about how we simplified the demographics of the St. Louis Park Public School District. Just bringing the question, does that lead or potentially suggest that we're not currently, being inclusive? So just wanting to have that as a point of discussion. But besides that, there were no other revisions or comments about the way that this policy was written.
There was the typo on the incomplete sentence, I guess I should say, for section 3. We were just going to, I don't, that first sentence of community education director. In my board book, it looks still not corrected.
I think we just wanted to put an and between where that comment is after state of Minnesota. Shall be licensed by the state of Minnesota and oversee the management of the program.
Does anybody else have any thoughts about whether they want that to read the demographics of St. Louis Park Public Schools or the demographics of St. Louis Park and St. Louis Park Schools, maybe?
So community ed serves the entire community, and there are students as part of it with the youth development committee and some of that work, but our school demographics are further along on the diversity continuum than our community at large. And we talked about that when we had our joint meeting with the city council. Our school system has experienced an increase of diversity at a faster rate than the overall community has. And so I want to be careful with how we talk about demographics in a policy like this, because this policy is serving both communities. I think we need to address the fact that we have two sets of demographic communities that we're serving.
Maybe that's satisfied by how we say and any other groups participating in the community education program. I mean, that's the rest of the community. Anybody wants to sign up, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe it's fine.
Yeah, if we wanted to shorten it and be faithful to our motto of lifelong learning, we could say the St. Louis Park Learning Community or something like that. But, I mean, I'm fine either way.
So I'm not hearing anybody suggest any specific change that we don't already have here. So I think when it comes on for the action agenda, it will be as printed here, unless somebody wants to correct my impression of the group. Nope, okay. Except for the one and that's been added. And I'll give that to Aston here. And then next up we have policy 902, use of school district facilities and equipment.
Chair Gores, members of the board. If you recall from our meeting last time, the major changes connected to this policy was the removal of the equipment piece. So you'll see that throughout the policy. And besides that, there are a few things that you'll see that went from approval to review under B, section 4. B, you'll see that it used to state upon approval by the school board, but what we learned is that the school board never approved it, so we weren't necessarily aligned to what the actual practice. So you'll see a few changes that better align with what our current practice is, and then you'll see the removal of the equipment component connected to this policy.
Any comments? I think it reads much better. So next up, we have the consent agenda. Is there anybody who wants to pull anything off of the consent agenda for discussion? Okay, hearing none. Is there a motion to pass the consent agenda? Moved by Ann. Is there a second? Second by Kim. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries 7-0. Now we're to the action agenda. We have approval of 2018-19 probationary non-renewal staffing resolution. It is recommended that the school board approve the resolution relating to the non-renewal of the teaching contracts of 11 probationary teachers. And this will require a roll call vote. Rick, is there a resolution that needs to be read or not?
I think somewhere deep in some archive it says that the resolution shall be read. The board usually waives the reading of the resolution.
Mary has moved to waive the reading of the resolution and has seconded that motion. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. So now we are up to the motion. It is recommended the school board approve the resolution relating to the non-renewal of the teaching contracts of 11 probationary teachers. Do I have a motion? Moved by Karen. Is there a second? Seconded by Mary. Is there any discussion? Okay, now we have a roll call vote. Jim? Sorry, there was one? Sorry, Ken?
Yeah, I'll go. Every year we do this. Every year I disagree with it, but it's part of things that we need to do just to make sure that we're doing the right things. So, and you know, the risk is that we lose good teachers, but it's part of the balancing act that we have to do every year. So, agree.
I was going to say something along the same lines. Difficult every year, but yes, something that needs to be done.
I guess I could, if I could I ask Rick to just speak from a very high level about what this process looks like and sort of the why?
Sure. So each year, well, teachers in the state of Minnesota under the tenure statute typically have a 3-year probationary period. Unless they've completed 3 consecutive years in another school district, then they get 1 year of probation when they come to us. So a number of the people you know, in this group have been evaluated and found that they didn't meet the standards of St. Louis Park Public School teachers based on a review of their performance. And so some of them are being let go because maybe they weren't a good fit for the style, curriculum, equity, racial equity journey that we're on. And so some people are you know, selectively being released, not offered a contract for next year. There are a few of the teachers in this group that, because of some declining enrollment and right-sizing the organization, we didn't have enough chairs for all of the people that we had you know, currently in place. And so a few of the teachers are being non-renewed for lack of pupils, which would be another reason under the tenure statute for people being released.
Director Casey? Director Tatalovich?
Aye.
Director Morrison?
Aye.
Director Gores?
Aye.
Director Tomback?
Aye.
Director Waters?
Aye.
Director Beneke? Aye.
Right, carries 7-0. Next up, we have approval of the long-term facility maintenance funding strategy. It is recommended that the school board approve the LTFM funding strategy as presented. Is there a motion?
So
Moved by Ken. Is there seconded by Mary? Sure. Any discussion?
I'd just like to again thank Patricia and your whole team and everybody from others just for this great presentation that we had, and it's been very easy to understand the why and the how of what we're doing here, and it's been I'm really grateful for that, so thank you.
I second that. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries 7-0. Next, we have approval of District 287 Long-Term Facility Maintenance LTFM Resolution. It is recommended that the school board approve the District 287 LTFM resolution as presented. I think we need someone to talk about it, and then we'll... Patricia? Thank you.
This resolution is very similar to the annual resolution, or it's identical to the annual resolution that this school district does for LTFM. The 287 school board approved this resolution, and this division of the LTFM costs to the member districts, and it's very similar to last year's dollar amount.
Is it divvied up per enrollments?
Yep, that's included in the packet. There's an item that describes how it's divided among the member districts.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, is there a motion on the 287 LTFM resolution? Moved by Ann. Is there a second? Seconded by Ken. Any discussion? Ann made the motion and Ken seconded it. Jim?
I just want to make sure the teacher resolution is correct.
Oh.
Was there a separate motion?
So on number C on the agenda, the approval of District 287 long-term facility maintenance. Ann has moved that and Ken has seconded it. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carries 7-0. Next up, we have the employment agreement approval, Director of Assessment, Research, and Evaluation for 1 year. Probably can comment on that, Rick, for 219 to 220. It is recommended that the school board approve the employee agreement between Independent School District 283 and Director of Assessment, Research, and Evaluation for the 2019-20 school year as presented. Rick?
Chair, members of the board, superintendent, I'm sure superintendent would like to comment or say a few words about the candidate selected. We had Prachi Mukherjee, the Director of Assessment, retired after 16 some odd years in the district and a fabulous colleague. So we posted the job. We had over 39 applicants from really all over the country. We entertained 8 of those 39. They came from everywhere from Pittsburgh, California, Denver, Chicago. So it was quite a good showing. We interviewed on May 13th, multiple rounds of interviews with a selection of the team of the cabinet and the superintendent, and then we had a teacher and principal team. And we had a unanimous recommendation to move forward with the person that we're bringing forward today, Sylvie Un Lafayette. And so we're very happy with the process, and it moved very quickly, and it was a clear choice who will be the best person for St. Louis Park in this role going forward. You asked about the 1-year contract. All of the directors are on a 2-year cycle from 2018 to 2020, and so really this is a 1-year contract, and then she'll renew with all the other directors as we bring this back to the board next year.
That's the answer I thought you'd give.
I think Rick did a tremendous job summarizing, but I just would want to reiterate that was the unanimous selection by both stakeholder groups, and we're extremely excited to welcome her to the team. Believe strongly that she will help us accelerate our work towards our desired future here in St. Louis Park. So we look forward to her joining our team in early July.
Yeah, the contract indicates the term starts July 8, 2019.
I'll be supporting this, but I was a little concerned about the Notre Dame degree, so I just have to put that on the record, so.
Okay, so now that the contract's been presented, do I have a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Moved by Karen, is there a second? Joe seconds it. Such a forgiving soul. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries 7-0. Next, we have the employment agreement probationary extension. It is recommended that the school board approve the employment agreement probationary extensions for the 2019-2020 school year as presented. Rick?
So as I mentioned, one of the previous items, there are times when a teacher comes after having completed 3 years in another district and we only get 1 year to look. And sometimes people are right on the bubble and you believe that if they have another year, it may work out that they become, successful long-term employees for the rest of their career. We met with the teacher and the PAT, Teachers Association, and laid out the situation, and the teachers and PAT requested an extension that the individual would waive their statutory rights to a continuing contract if quid pro quo offered an extra year of probation. And we don't do this often, but in this case, we're recommending this employment agreement for 1 additional year to see if they do in fact get their legs underneath them and become successful long-term St. Louis Park teachers.
So is there a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Moved by Mary, is there a second? Seconded by Ann, is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries 7-0. Next up, we have policy development, second readings. Does anybody want these policies to be called out separately, or can we do it in one motion? If I hear no objection to doing it as one motion, I'll ask for one motion on it. Okay. So, policy development, second reading of policies 515, protection and privacy of pupil records, 901, community education, 902, use of school district facilities and equipment. It is recommended that the school board approve the second reading of those 3 policies with any of the changes noted in our discussion. It is moved by Ken. Is there a second? Is that you, Ann? Seconded by Ann. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries 7-0. We are up to communications and transmittals.
So it is a big thrill to announce the success of the high school quiz bowl team at the national championships in Atlanta. Our teacher, Peter Dangerfield, has done this for the past 4 years, and he said in his note this is his 4th trip to nationals with our students, but this is the first time he has brought 3 groups of kids, an A, B, and C team, to nationals. He said the C team had the most fun of any team, even though they only won 1 of their 7 rounds. They had a great time with the experience. The B team went 3-4. They only had 2 non-seniors on that team, so there's a lot of hope for next year. The A team. This team went 6-1. It's amazing. He said it's hard to describe how amazing this is. They tied for 3rd with 8 other teams at 6-1. Their only loss at that point in the competition was to a team that was 7-0. So they had, as he said, a fantastic day of quizzing. So they did have time for a little bit of fun. They went to the Martin Luther King Jr. National Park and the Centennial Olympic Park. But the key thing is we have really motivated students who want to learn and perform, and credit to teacher Peter Dangerfield for making it happen for an expanded group of kids, and it would be great to have them come back in a spotlight to tell us about their experience in Atlanta. So thank you.
I'm not sure if this was mentioned at the last meeting, but I'll be quick. There was a drone racing competition, and I guess it was the first ever in Minnesota high schools with St. Louis Park against Apple Valley, and you can find all sorts of links on the local news, and I believe there's a nice write-up in the Star Tribune as well.
I think I forgot to mention this earlier, but Mary and I met with a couple of representatives from Roots and Shoots and their advisor earlier to just review with them how our board proceeded with resolutions and first readings and second readings and commentary, and to sort of let them know that there would be some likely suggested changes to the resolution and how we operate so that they wouldn't be surprised. And we did have one of the representatives here today in our audience with their advisor, so I was glad they came and could hear how this process worked. The other comment I want to make is Ann and I with Aston and Sarah, I don't know if anyone else was there, were at the PSI celebration of their kind of ending their tenure in the central building and preparing for their new move to what we have formerly called the Cedar Manor building. And it was just a lovely celebration. Lots of former teachers and principals and students came back. Sarah and her team put together a great video that I think has been on our website, and it was a very good experience, I thought.
That was a great event, and thank you, Nancy, for your comments, both from a parent perspective and from a board perspective. I just have one other little thing, is that as part of my kind of learning as I've joined the 287 board, I've been working to really understand how we serve our students. And so I met with Tammy Reynolds, and I wish she was here, but she said, why don't you come and see the new Transition Plus facility in Lenox? So Transition Plus had been at the Cedar Manor site, and it has moved as of this past winter to a new space on the third floor of Lenox, and it is fabulous. And I hope that all of you will take a tour there. Call Tammy; she will set you up. She will take you over there. It's beautiful. The students are doing just really incredible things. When I was there, actually a lot of students were leaving just as I was arriving. They were going to Urban Boat Builders to make canoe paddles, which was part of their experience for the day, and another group was leaving to go to a trip to the library. So the kids are in and out all day doing amazing work experience, and then doing lifelong skills in the building, and it is just it's a great space for them. So very grateful to the voters who have helped us create this space for them, and then also just for Tammy and for Elizabeth and the rest of the staff there, who were very welcoming and who are doing an amazing job settling into their new home.
So I just would close with part of what was in the superintendent's report, just as a reminder. Our commencement is, well, two things actually. Commencement is June 6th at 7:30. And so come earlier to get a good seat. I recommend that, because it's going to be great weather. We're going to be outside. Aston's going to take care of all of that. But before that, the commencement is the highlight of my year on the board. But the next highlight to my year on the board is the senior choir recital. And the senior choir recital is tomorrow, May 29th, and it starts at 7 in the auditorium. I think there's a Pops concert probably in the cafeteria if they repeat their pattern of prior years before then. But then the seniors who choose to get to do a solo or a duet or a trio, whatever they want to do, and we have community members that have rehearsed with them and provide accompaniment, and then the awards are given out, and inevitably the choir director, John Muskowski, tears up at some point, and that's just because he's letting his, students go, and he does it with great grace. And so it's a wonderful event, and if you're able to join me, please come. Now, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Karen. Is there a second? Seconded by Ann. All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned, 7:00.